Hey y'all, I'm Carolina Tony. Today the road brings me to Sarasota, Florida, and I am standing in front of the Ringling Museum. These are people that started the big show. You know what I'm talking about, at a big tent with all the lions and clowns and tigers and all. And we are going to explore the museum today and learn a little bit about the history of the Ringling Brothers Museum. And we'll get started, but right after this station identification. And this is what it's all about. Here is some of the artwork. Circus advertising. Advertising has been an important part of the circus operations since the earliest shows. Although technologies have changed and advertising now comes in many forms, these images used to represent the wonders of today's circus are not different from those used 100 years ago. Poster from the Barnum and Bailey Greatest Show on Earth, the Dip of Death. This lady gets in a little car riding on a track and goes down and around and jumps and comes down. Wow. In a dreadful headlong leap of loof and topsy-turvy plunging somersault, the sensation of all sensations, which may be aptly termed a fearful frolic with fate. An absolutely unparalleled deed of daring, just as illustrated and costly nearly $2,000 a minute, the most expensive as the well-known, most hazardous act ever devised. And I could never be a circus barker because the words are too big for my mouth. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, welcome to the one, the only Howard Brothers Circus. Unlike anything you've ever seen, this 3,800 square foot model depicts the American Tended Circus in its golden age from 1919 to 1938. More than 13,000 people could enjoy a performance under the big top. The circus traveled with over 1,300 workers, performers, 800 animals, and all the equipment needed to put on a performance. Just in one season, this show could travel up to 15,000 miles and perform in 150 towns and cities all across America. Fewer than 20 of these dates were for more than a single day. The logistics of moving such a large organization is overwhelming, and yet the circus did it and still does. Logistical complexity inspired by Howard Tibbles. He created the most accurate replica of the colossal canvas city. Modeled after the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, the Howard Brothers Circus shows life on any typical circus day. These flat cars were used to hold the wagons that would be pulled through the town from the tracks to where the circus was actually going to take place. Here's some footage of it actually happening. In 1927, the Ringling show traveled on 100 rail cars composed of 46 flat cars, 27 stock cars, 22 coaches, 3 advertising cars, a dining car, and John Ringling's private car. Each wagon was pulled from the railroad yard to the show's home for the day, the circus lot. They were carefully positioned on the lot to make working as efficient as possible. The wagons carried all the equipment, furnishing, wardrobe, and props for the show. Food supplies were ordered in advance of the show's arrival and were delivered to the lot early on the day. A typical day's order consisted of 2 barrels of sugar, 30 gallons of milk, 36 bags of table salt, 50 bushels of potatoes, 110 oranges, 200 pounds of tea and coffee, and it goes on and on. So they were fed very well. The cookhouse was the first tent set up on the circus lot. Before sunrise, workers had the tent erected and breakfast cooking. Soon the air was filled with a smell of cakes, sausage, and eggs. The Ringling cookhouse prepared food for 1,300 workers and performers 3 times a day. And there they are all chowing down. The hotel flag, and I'm guessing that's it in the very center, was raised over the dining tent to signal the workers, staff, and performers that it was mealtime. Each person with the circus had a designated seat at the table with china plates, silverware, a water pitcher, condiments, and bread with butter to feed all the personnel breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The waiters would serve 3,900 meals a day. The ring stop tent, known as the pad room, housed only horses that performed in the big top, not the draft horses that pulled the wagons. Ring stock included Liberty horses without harnesses that performed on command, and high school horses that were so finely trained that they appeared to be doing tricks without any direction from the rider. Various rest tents were set up in the backyard for the circus personnel. The band, with over 30 members, shared a rest tent with 50 or more ushers who worked in the big top. There were other rest tents where workers slept between setting up the lot in the early hours of the morning and tearing it down after the last show of the night. And of course, all the tents that we've seen so far are very, very small in compared to the big top. Look at the size of this thing. Of course, it's just a model, but it is still huge. And we are looking at the back side, and it's getting night. We're at the back side of the tent, and this thing is so finely orchestrated. As you can see, all the performers are coming in, and they're staged from both directions, and this is the performer's entrance. And this thing goes off just like clockwork, and this goes off like a finely tuned engine. Also known as the backyard was the area where performers, staff workers spent their time in between performances. Hidden from the general public behind the tented city, the backyard was filled with activities of workers caring for equipment and performers preparing for the show. Some of the most famous center ring stars required their own private tents in the backyard. The tent and a private room on the circus train were generally written into the annual contract. These featured performers furnished their tents with all of the comforts of home, including comfortable chairs, pillows, throw blankets, oriental rugs, and even their pets. This is the performer's dressing room. I can imagine it would be like a madhouse, but I bet very organized. This is the sea elephant. One of the favorite attractions of the circus was Goliath. Weighing 3¼ tons, the giant sea elephant traveled in a specially constructed water tank on the train. When he is not being wheeled around in the Big Top's track on a wagon, he was housed in a tank inside his own tent and was fed 150 pounds of fish a day. Are all the folks coming in their old cars lining up to go into the circus. A little special sidewalk. From the parking lot, they travel down through the sidewalk, and here's a place you can even check your bicycle for 10 cents. And the little sidewalk leads onto the midway. The visitors' first circus experience was on the midway. The circus lot came alive with sights and sounds and smells. There were concessions hawking their goods, ticket sellers crying, "Step right up," and a calliope whistling away at the entrance to the sideshow. The brightly covered wagons and the strange images of the sideshow banners added to the excitement. The sideshow banner line composed brightly painted images of human curiosities lined the midway in front of the sideshow tent. The exciting and exotic images of the human pincushion, the fireproof man, the tiny town performers hinted at the wonders housed inside the sideshow. Sometimes a few dancers, a sword swallower, performed on the stage in front to attract the customers. Step right up. Come see Skeets Hubbard, human pincushion. Once through the midway, we come to the main entrance. From the front lot, visitors made their way to the main entrance. Here, the masses of people funneled through the 5 gates as ticket tellers collected their paper ticket stubs. Although the marquee advertised "this way to the big show," visitors actually found themselves entering the menagerie tent. The menagerie tent for many Americans, the circus was the first place they saw animals from other continents, along with expected elephants, lions, zebras. Visitors found hippopotami and giraffes and even polar bears and other exotic animals that might be seen in the menagerie, including orangutans, macaws, and kangaroos, and all those elephants. And even a cafeteria for the animals. Finally, the performance tent, the largest of all the tents on the lot, was commonly referred to as the Big Top. The raising of the tent was an amazing act of skill, coordination, and practice. In less than 4 hours, the 6 center poles, 74 quarter poles, 122 sidewall poles, 550 stakes, and 26,000 yards of canvas became the Big Top, the centerpiece of the circus lot. Holy moly, look at that. And all these things were going on at the same time. Seating in the Big Top could accommodate as many as 15,000 people. The folding chairs along the length of the tent were reserved seats and were more expensive than the general admission bleacher seats located along the curved ends of the tent. If all the seats were sold, straw was spread in front of the stands to provide extra seating for children. The packed Big Top top was known as the straw house. We're gonna get every last dime and nickel they can. They even carried with them a blacksmith tent. The blacksmith department carried all the equipment needed to keep the show moving. Forges, anvils were set up at each lot to allow the blacksmiths to repair wagon parts, reshoe horses as necessary. Also traveling with the blacksmith department was the leather workers, whose primary responsibility was to take care of all the animal harnesses. And just think at all the people it took to put this greatest show on earth on. And I've got to throw this in here. In today's time, with people wanting to work, it would never happen again. After each stand, the train master was responsible for organizing the process of loading the circus train. More than 150 wagons had to fit perfectly onto the flat cars. The train master knew exactly where to place each wagon on the train in order to use the space efficiently.
This is interesting.
After the evening show began, the workers tore down the cookhouse and the dining tents, and they were packed onto the wagons and hauled back to the railroad yard, where they were loaded on to the first section of the train, known as the Flying Squadron. Before the final acts had performed in the evening, the Flying Squadron was on its way to the next stand to begin the process all over again, so the cook tents could be set up before the majority of the crew got there. Circus performers. This is a blanket from Gunther. It was designed for Gunther Jubal Williams. In his farewell tour, he entertained an estimate of 2 million people during 12,000 performances over his distinguished career. This is a costume from Bello Knock. He's a 7th generation circus performer, and he's delighted audiences all over the world with his comedy and daredevil stunts. And you have probably seen him at some point in your life on TV. You know him by his stand-up hair. He is loved by hair product companies all over the world. A famous clown, Barry Lubin, Grandma Clown Wardrobe. The Calliope. And I imagine that carried some type of wild, dangerous animal. This is the ticket wagon from 1911. the human cannonball. This is the Wisconsin. This was the personal rail car of John Ringling. He would travel on business, often ahead of the circus, to scout out exactly where the circus would be, as well as he would use it for pleasure for him and his wife. A clawfoot tub in a rail car. In the early 1900s, this is how you spell success. White-faced clowns. A giant pair of roller skates, a giant Band-Aid box. Look, Ma, no hands. All right, well, I hope you have enjoyed our trip to Sarasota, Florida, to the Ringling Circus Museum. I have had a blast and learned a lot of stuff, things that I didn't even know that went on behind the scenes. There is a lot here, and I know now why it's called the greatest show on earth. It's awesome. Enjoy this video. Be sure to share it with your family and friends. But until next time, y'all have a good day.